Man, one of these days I gotta get a ring light or something. Hello, welcome back! At the end of my previous video, I said I was gonna film something that was about... Basically, I've been postponing the video I was talking about for 6 weeks, just because there's so much work. It's a lot. It's very daunting. Basically, I asked my doctor for my entire health history. The idea of the video is to tell you everything I've done to combat bedwetting and overactive bladder. That's still happening. It's just overwhelming because I have a really good memory. I really remember dates and names and just very exact details well. At least I think I do. However, there's so much that I've done that I couldn't do it all by myself, and I started off by trying to figure out all the drugs I'd taken. I was like, okay, maybe that'll like jumpstart my memory on everything. Long story short is that I basically went to my doctor and said that I wanted my entire health history, and they gave it to me just up to like 2004, I think, when I was about 12. So that video is still happening. I've been trying to do it all day by just the way it's formatted is that it's all in a certain orders of everything. So first order is like diagnoses, and then times hospitalized, and then treatments, and then all these things, and then it goes into like the actual doctor's notes, and then it goes into the actual prescriptions. Like they're all categorized in backwards order as well. So the whole time, like for the past like 6 hours, I've just been like copying and pasting and putting them in a chronological order to help like everything just be more solid and easy to go through. So that video is happening. It's just taking a long time, and this explanation is taking even longer. So today, this is a video I wanted to do for probably about a year now, and since I'm going through everything and I actually have the physical doctor's notes, might as well just do it, and then I'll talk about it again in the next video. But this one, I just kind of wanted to give you like a very specific diagnostic idea of what overactive bladder looks and feels like, because many people might not know how it really actually feels, especially when it comes to urgency and frequency. Those are the two I'm looking at today, because there's 4 symptoms of overactive bladder: urgency, frequency, urge incontinence, and then nocturia, which is just waking up at night to go to the bathroom. I have all the symptoms, including, unfortunately, bedwetting. So I still wake up to go pee at night, not every single night, but that doesn't mean I won't wet the bed regardless. So whatever I have, I just happen to have all 4 symptoms plus extras, which is so fun. However, this video is just about urgency and frequency. So I hope you like it. So as many of you know, I've had overactive bladder and bedwetting my entire life. So not many things have really changed until kind of recently when I've had the InterStim implant. It's just been a gradual symptom decrease of urgency and frequency and urge incontinence over the past 2 years since I've had the implant and the revision surgery. So if you don't know what that is, I have a couple videos about that. I will link them below if you want to know more about the InterStim implant. Sorry, I had to go let my little brother into the house, and now the camera is all different. I'm not sure if this is the same position it was in. So I know my bladder can hold at least up to around 600 milliliters, because I've done many tests on my own by measuring how much I actually void. Some people say that the standard amount one bladder should be able to hold before absolutely needing to void is about 300 to 400 milliliters. That being said, it can actually hold more than that, like I just said. But at the same time, you usually start to feel the need to pee or the need to void, or what they call micturition or micturition. I'm not sure how it's pronounced. Either way, at 150 or 175 milliliters. So anyway, something I wanted to talk about for a long time is actually what overactive bladder looks and feels like, because I didn't really think about it most of my life. So maybe this will help you realize that you actually have overactive bladder. I don't know why I didn't realize it. It just didn't occur to me that that wasn't normal, I guess is all I could say. So usually when urgency happens, you can start to feel your bladder start to fill a little bit. Like you might feel like it will become increasingly incrementally more urgent that you will have to use the washroom. That's normal for it to start to feel more full, and you're a little bit more uncomfortable as the time passes. The point is that as it starts to fill, the wall of your bladder can either stay relaxed and fill and the bladder neck is contracted and closed, and that's normal, or in my case, the detrusor muscles, which are the bladder wall, start to contract, and then they send signals. I'm just laughing at this movement with my hands. They send signals to the brain saying, hey, we're contracting, we need to go pee now. And then in which case it can start to tell the bladder that it's okay, that's fine, go ahead, and it starts to like leak. That's a pretty terrible way of explaining it. Anyway, so the study I'm going to talk about today is from December of 2014. I'm also going to reference a study done in September of 2012, because in September of 2012 I had a urodynamic study done by my primary and first urologist, where, like I said, he inserted a camera into my bladder and looked around to see if there was anything wrong. He came back with nothing. He took a camera with a light on the end, and it's called like a cystorethoscopy, I think it's how it's pronounced. And they insert it into your bladder and look for anything remarkable, or essentially something that is out of the norm. What he said he found was that there was no evidence of pelvic floor prolapse. The post-void residual urine by bladder scan showed 43 milliliters. On entering the bladder, both urethral orifices were identified and were endoscopically unremarkable. That is a hard sentence to say. So apparently I am unremarkable in terms of my actual bladder. So in September 6, 2012, I had a pressure flow urodynamics study. This one was where I was sitting, because I remember sitting in a room with a lady nurse, and she basically was on the other side of the room, and there inside my bladder were a bunch of tubes and stuff. One of them was to fill it, and one of them was to test how the bladder was filling, and below me was a pot, and I remember if I just peed, she told me if I just peed out, it would just go into the pot or whatever. So it was a really weird exam, but anyway, and the post-void residual volume was 50 cc's of water. So my bladder was filled in the sitting position, as I said. Apparently I tolerated 228 cc's of this water. The detrusor pressure of my bladder was flat. There was no obvious overactivity. Nonetheless, the functional capacity is reduced. So basically, as she filled it, I was uncomfortable. So I remember her asking me specific questions. She basically kept on asking me, at this point, tell me if you were driving on the highway, would you pull over if you had to pee? She wanted me to get to that point because she just wanted to hear me say when I was uncomfortable. I know that it's very strange because during this exam, I didn't have any overactivity capacity or functioning. Like nothing was starting to wiggle. But basically I was just so uncomfortable at 228 when she stopped that when I was like, I need to pee right now. So the fact is that she said there was no obvious overactivity, but the functional capacity of me filling my bladder was reduced. That doesn't mean it is all the time, just during that study it was. Which I always find fascinating when I do these kind of exams and studies, is that they're not always the typical everyday overactive bladder symptoms. Like when I did my first sleep study, I didn't wet the bed. Like that would have been incredibly helpful if I did. I would have loved to, so that they could see when I did or something like in my brain. But that's another story. But anyways, it was just interesting to me, is that it stopped at I had to tell her to stop at 228, and that's when I peed because I had to get rid of the water. So speaking about that, my voiding appeared to be quite dysfunctional. I had initially very high pressure in excess of 75 centimeters of water with moderate straining artifact. Don't know what that means. My flow was intermittent, didn't know that. And I only voided 134 cc's out of the 228 cc's that was infused. So she thinks that I might have some discomfort from the procedure, which I did, and I was also inhibited by the surroundings. Yeah, I might have been pretty uncomfortable peeing in front of somebody, I guess. So that I'm glad she noted that, because I was really unhappy when she was doing this. Like, I was miserable. At the end of voiding, the detrusor pressure stayed elevated at 44 cc's of water, or centimeters of water, for a while before returning to baseline, and this may be a form of detrusor overactivity. This study demonstrates reduction in functional bladder capacity and what appears to be somewhat dysfunctional voiding with detrusor overactivity terminally. That was one of the studies, and this is not the one I wanted to talk about, but I just thought that was interesting to note. So that was in September of 2012. However, the one I want to talk about today was on December 11th, 2014. The video urodynamic study is the one I want to talk about. What I had to do was I had to go into a room, a huge room, and I had to stand against a wall, like this wall, because I was going to have an x-ray placed, like a video x-ray placed on my bladder in front of me. There was my doctor like beside me here, and there was a nurse like over here, and she was the one in charge of filling my bladder, and my urologist, this other urologist, was in charge of watching it being filled. And I remember the lady, she looked at me kind of like judgingly. She was just like, "Do you think you've emptied your bladder?" And I was like, oh, I had to void before they started, like as make sure we go to the bathroom and actually void, not standing in front of them and just pee. And she looks at me, she's like, "Do you feel like you've voided your bladder entirely?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's empty." And she's like, "No, it's not. It had like 80 cc's full of urine still left," because she like showed me, she's like, "I'm emptying it right now. Do you feel anything?" And I was like, "No." And she was just like, "Oh, I can't believe it." She might have just been in shock or something, but anyways, by the way, I felt like an anomaly my entire life because no one, you'll find out in the other video, but no one could really figure out what's going on. And this particular study was so funny because I remember him, Dr. Jerry was looking at me just like, "I figured it out. I figured it out." He seems so happy with himself. He could just physically see when my bladder was being overactive, which I'm about to get to. But it was just like, she was Miss Judgy and he was Mr. Skeptical, and then turned into like Mr. Brilliant, like he solved my life problems, which he didn't, but it was just kind of funny. But she was just like, "You had a remaining 80 cc's of, or milliliters of urine in your bladder." I was just like, "Didn't know. Sorry, ma'am. I didn't mean to leave that there as a gift for you." That's how it felt like she was judging me. Anyways, so they recorded that in the notes here. So the post-void residual volume was 80 cc's of urine. I'm so sorry if I ruined your life, ma'am. Something I'm going to show you on the screen is the actual chart that Dr. Jerry gave me to take home of this whole study. I've had to stop this video like 800 times, so if the video is in like different positions, I'm sure that it's not probably going to bother anyone, but the continuity errors in the positions of the camera is bothering me already. So anyways, basically all these years I've had this this piece of paper. This is what Dr. Jerry gave me as a gift of leaving when he figured out how my overactive bladder was actually functioning. At the top of the page, there's like the minute marks, as well as it goes along, there's like different spikes of where it recognized that there was some overactivity in the bladder. What Dr. Jerry wrote in his results was, so the bladder was filled in standing oblique position under fluoroscopic control. Total volume infused was 275 cc's as opposed to 228 cc's from that other previous study about 2 years before this. That was a really long run-on sentence. I'm so sorry. There was definitely high filling pressure between 11 and 14 centimeters of water. So on the page there, I believe he's marked it at almost 14 centimeters. However, right before that, you can see there's 2 spikes on the page right before that urgent line. That was when I told him I was feeling urgent, because he only asked me a couple times when I was starting to feel urgent. So it would have just been right after that. That's why it's not exactly on the line. However, that would have been about 14 centimeters of water is what he's recognizing it as. He does say in his report, right after that 11 and 14 centimeters of water, the infusion was discontinued and the pressure stayed the same level and did not come down. There is definitely reduction in compliance with reduced cystometric capacity as identified in 2012. The bladder outline was smoothed and otherwise normal, and the bladder neck closed at rest. No evidence of okay, that's how we're going to pronounce it, reflux. Which, by the way, let's look that up. It is a condition in which urine flows retrograde or backward from the bladder into the uterus. Oh, okay. It's just when the urine actually goes backwards into the kidneys or the ureters, like the tubey things. Okay, never mind, I didn't know what that was. Okay, so the interesting stuff that he notes. While we were watching the resting pressure for any change after the infusion had been discontinued, she suddenly felt urge and had a significant overactive bladder contraction at to 23 centimeters of water with a slight change in bladder shape, indicating detrusor contraction and minimal opening of the bladder neck, but no incontinence. Nonetheless, this confirms detrusor overactivity, which was evident in 2012 as an after contraction following her dysfunctional voiding. This is my interpretation of the page. Even though it says urgent at 14, I think it was urgent at 14 before the urgent at 14 happens, right between the first urgency and the second urgency. That being said, he also said he stopped it at 14 centimeters of water. At that point, you can see that there's like the ups and downs, like this valley between these two spikes. That's where I think this is the resting period, because in that first minute of them just leaving the water in my bladder just to sit and rest, that's when my bladder was just like, whoa, and it freaked out. Where that big lump is, it happened once, and he was like, oh my God. Like, he saw it. He's like, we didn't do anything. Your bladder just decided to become overactive for a long time. And that was like about 10 seconds. And he was asking me while this was happening how I felt. And I was just like, yeah, I'm uncomfortable and it hurts. Like, that's how overactive bladder feels to me, is that it hurts because your bladder just wants to contract and it's like flexing, or that's how it feels it's acting. So when he saw those last three big changes, that overactivity really made him be like, that's exactly what's happening. You have an overactive bladder. It's quite impressive at how overactive it is, because while I was filling, it kind of was overactive. It was while it wasn't filling, when you're resting and watching it act, it just was like, and just like freaked out. So I always thought that was really interesting. That's why I held on to this piece of paper, as you can hear me fiddling with it. Like, even after that study was done, I never really thought about how I felt about overactive bladder. I was always just obsessed and concerned about bedwetting issues, because that was the more prevalent thing in my life. It was only about this year, well, maybe not 2019, but like the past year or so, that I realized that I actually could feel it. I always thought that was normal to feel this like intense, sharp pain in my bladder. Now that I'm focusing on it and realizing when it happens, that's the only time I notice that it actually is uncomfortable and painful. Like, I wouldn't say that it's debilitating by any means. It just means that once it starts to fill, it slowly creeps up, and then it sort of spikes, and then it slowly creeps up, and then it spikes again, and then it slowly creeps up, and then it spikes more and more and more as it starts to get more filling. That's how my bladder reacts. Those spikes, when those happen, they go from like I said this before, from 0 to 100 in like just a couple seconds. Like, it's very, very quick. When I'm on the toilet, I can still feel my bladder become overactive and painful even after I've voided. Normally it's after I've voided. To be honest, it's not really during the actual toilet use. The thing is that it still starts to overreact even after I've done voiding, and it's weird. And I always thought it was normal, and now that I know, and starting to study myself, but like the more I go into these doctor's appointments and try to figure out what's going on, the more I'm like, it's incredibly not normal. Most of the time, like, this is unfortunately normal, because most people will feel this way like at some point in their lives. I think they still say about 50% of the population struggles with some bladder dysfunction at some point in their lives. So unfortunately, it's like a huge chunk of the world that struggles with this sort of stuff. It's just like, I have it all, and it's been all the time for my entire life. That's why having the InterStim implant has been such an incredible fix for me, is that those spikes, those jumps in overactivity in my bladder happen way less frequently. They don't happen as strongly as they used to. When they do, they still hurt. Like, I still get those spikes of overactivity in my bladder every single day, but they're not as common, like I said, and they don't last as long. As you can see on the page as well, it goes back down. Like, it doesn't stay up there and just stay at 100 the entire time. Now I'm noticing less of those up and downs and more of just like a steady increase in, like, my bladder's filling, my bladder's uncomfortable, I need to go pee soon. I can wait maybe another 20 minutes. Before, I couldn't wait. I also would have urgent incontinence as those urgencies would happen. So every single time an urgency would happen, I'd, lose a little bit of urine every single time. And it was very uncomfortable and frustrating and annoying, and I'd have to like figure out if I was sitting properly so that the pad would be there to catch it. And a lot of the time I'd have leaks, and it's just been an embarrassing life. Yeah, that's it. I just wanted to explain how overactivity felt, how it looked on paper, how it looked to a doctor. This isn't obviously all the studies I've done lots of other different things. I just think these 3 things were pretty important to discovering how my overactive bladder worked and functioned, and that it wasn't due to any physical abnormalities about my bladder, nor the bladder neck, nor the kidneys. So that's good. Just don't know why it's happening. Like I said, I've always kind of felt like this anomaly in the medical world, and like I always felt so alone when it came to this. So even though I started my YouTube channel and then I've met so many wonderful people talking openly about this with me, it is still so very strange, and I still don't know what's going on. Just not everything lines up, and like nothing in the medical world, or not always will in the medical world, where everything line up perfectly and that will be your exact diagnosis. But it's just nice to know that I'm not alone in this. Like I'm sure everyone, or many millions of people out there who have this, like feel the same way. Like this is just weird and it doesn't make sense. You'd think that a bladder should act normal, and like, I don't know, maybe that's just how I feel. But if this helped you at all and you now realize that you have those spikes, and like if you start to like listen or like focus on your bladder when your bladder's starting to act weird, like just wait and see if those spikes go up to like just I need to pee now, and then come back down again. Like maybe you have overactive bladder. So hopefully this video helped you, and if it did, you can share it with someone, maybe someone you know sort of had these problems, like maybe this will help them. So anyways, yeah, thanks for watching. I will try and come up with that other video as soon as possible. Like I said, it's very daunting. There's a lot of pages and there's a lot to go over, and I need to just be focused and like take another day and go through it all. But yeah, thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!